"Oh my god," I exclaimed. "I cannot be stuck here with you." Richie examined his nails and then leaned against the wall for a moment. "Honestly, me neither, but you don't see me whining about it, do you?" I buried my face in my hands and nearly sobbed. It didn't help that I was half drunk and that my head hurt like hell. Talk about partying during office hours. This had to happen. As if dealing with Richie on a daily basis at the office wasn't trouble enough, I was stuck with him in the elevator. There is a fate worse than death, after all. Shut up and let me think. You quit whining first. I am not whining. Richie snorted. Sure, Omar. That's exactly what's happening. Why? Why him? Why couldn't it have been Dexter, the actual hot guy in the office? I wanted to kill Richie, but even more than that, I wanted to kill myself first. The company wasn't paying me so much for me to dedicate so much of my time to it. If anything, I should have left the premises several hours ago, even before the party started. And on top of that, if I had the brains, I shouldn't have taken the elevator with Richie of all people. The building was old. This had to happen someday. The lights were out, and I wasn't sure when it would come back. I sat down, leaned against the wall for support, and then looked anywhere but at the swaying figure of Richie. How I had found myself here, one would wonder. And since I had nothing to do but wait and whine, I would sate that curiosity. Richie and I were, for better or worse, next-door neighbors. We hadn't always been like that, but now we were as adults. Years ago when we were younger and dumber, our families lived together in another city, next-door neighbors just like we are now. Then, as we got older, I shifted to my current city and lived here believing that I would never have to meet that loser Richie again. But then, some 10 months in, Richie bought the house next to mine and became my neighbor. I still couldn't forget the day. Then, as years went by, our rivalry powered by that age-old wound Richie had left on me strengthened. I absolutely hated seeing his face. I considered my office my own safe sanctuary, but then he joined the same company. I still remember walking into my office and being glad that I wouldn't have to acknowledge Richie's existence for the next 8 hours, when I found him sitting on a chair next to mine. He was my desk mate. I remember gawking at him, astonished and angry. He waved at me in return with a smile. Since that day, I hadn't known peace. Then, one day, our boss arrived in our cabin, called out all of our attention, and then said that the company would soon form a group to work on a special project that could, and he promised it would, save the company. I was selected in the group, and before I could be proud or happy, Richie was selected too. And that project was the reason we were working so late. It was also one of the reasons why Richie and I often left the office around the same time and either in the same bus or the same cab. But since it was nearing its conclusion, one of our colleagues decided to sneak in some drinks after our boss left. And that was why we were in this state. And no, I was not talking about the whole being stuck in an elevator with my annoying arch nemesis. That was another story. I should have known better than to continue working in this place, Richie muttered, and to my horror, pulled out his cigarette pack. What is wrong with you? I screamed at him. There wasn't enough light, so I pulled out my phone for the flashlight, only to discover my phone was almost dead. God, I should have put it in charge. I looked at him and repeated my words. Nothing's wrong with me, Richie replied and put one in his mouth. I was drunk, so I could be excused for my thoughts. Richie looked hot like that, with the unlit cigarette hanging from his mouth and his blonde windswept hair. He looked like one of Michelangelo's muse. God, he was so handsome. It was a shame his habits compelled me to hate him, and I absolutely hated him right this moment. I do not care if you get cancer because of those, but I'm not going to die like this. Do not smoke here. Lights out, Richie replied and pulled out his lighter. He was literally shaking in his boots, and he had the audacity to smoke? Indeed, what was wrong with him? Nothing bad can happen right now. Before he could actually light it, I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the lighter from his hand, and put it in my pocket. I was not going to give it to him. No! Just then, the lights came back. Richie stretched out his hand. Give it back now. I'm not going to smoke anymore. Lights back. Then the elevator moved, and then it stopped again. And because I was not holding on to anything, and I was drunk, I stumbled right into his chest. It was the most humiliating moment of my entire life. I pulled back and tried not to focus on his blue eyes. God, they were so pretty. Everything once again came to a standstill. "No. Lights out again," I replied a little stiffly. I made sure there was enough distance between us. Everything was looking more and more cliché. "Whatever," Richie muttered and dropped down onto the elevator floor. For the next 10 minutes, absolutely nothing happened. Then, he muttered, "I do not hate you, Omar. I'm not sure why you hate me." I glared at him. My phone was almost dead, so I switched it off. I hope Richie had the decency to use his own. "You stole my boyfriend." "Huh? When? Which one?" "God, you don't even remember. You're such an asshole." I looked away from him and at the top of the elevator. It was mirrored, a thing that I hadn't noticed before. My own darkened reflection stared back at me. I looked down again, suddenly scared for my life. What if one of those movie ghosts came alive this second? We were vulnerable after all. And they said to not make fun of ghosts, and I had done plenty of that in my younger years. I swallowed. "I'm pretty sure you hate dark places," I said. He scoffed. "I only hate confined spaces, and this is making me nauseated." "You're claustrophobic?" He snorted. "Good, Omar. You know how to take the hint." Again, nothing happened for the longest time. Then, to kill the time, I commented, "You're not going to puke on me, right? Can't you call someone?" "Call someone! My phone's dead." "My phone's dead too," he replied after a moment of silence. "And no, I'm not going to puke. That's not what I do." I rolled my tongue against my cheek. I feel like they've switched off everything, even the generator. How long are we going to be stuck here? When Richie didn't reply, I tried to feel his hand. God, I hope he hadn't turned into a monster or something. But the moment I touched him, he swatted my hand away with a small groan. He was breathing heavily. "Richie?" I called, feeling a little nervous and scared. I had absolutely no idea how to deal with claustrophobic people. If something happened, what was I going to do? "Fuck, I can't deal with this. Scream for help, will you? Can you scream?" Richie groaned, and I heard him scrambling to get on his feet. He sounded so nervous and scared, I couldn't help but feel sorry for him. "No one will hear us." "Then, do you need water?" "I do not think water is good now." I figured that much. "What should I do then, Richie? You're kind of freaking me out here." "Oh, I am so sorry, my majesty. I'll try to die in the corner." He sounded too sarcastic. I felt annoyed. "Okay, go and die for all I care." But not even 5 minutes later, he started acting as if he would actually die if he didn't get out of there. The absolute lack of light was also creating a huge problem. Worried, I decided I needed to comfort him. Maybe that would work. "Hey, Richie," I said softly. "It's alright." "Do not corner me," Richie said. "Oh, alright." How the hell was I going to comfort him then? "How do I help, Richie? Please tell me. I hate you, but I don't want you to die on me." "How nice of you." He gave a smothering laugh. "Distract me." "Huh?" "That usually helps." God, Richie was making me so nervous, I was sobering up more quickly than I would otherwise. I ran a knuckle down my temple and wondered what I should talk about. I decided on the office things. "Do you remember Sarah?" I said. "Apparently she's pregnant, and not with her husband's child. I heard it's someone else." "From our company?" "Yes." "I knew who it is then. Ian." I gasped. "No fucking way." "Yeah, Ian's a certified cheater." I rolled my tongue against my cheek. "So are you a certified cheater?" I exclaimed. The panic returned in Richie's voice. I felt embarrassed of myself, and even though I didn't feel as drunk as I felt earlier, I was drunk enough to enjoy it. "Why would you call me that? I've never cheated on you." I made a face, even though I knew he wouldn't be able to see. "You cannot cheat on me. We've never dated." "Oh," he said, sounding disappointed. God, was this man out of his mind? I was pretty sure claustrophobia did not mean losing memory. "What is wrong with you?" I asked again. "You're panicking me, Omar." "I'm sorry." I sat in my little corner and heard his harsh breaths. I did not know how to help him. Richie and I had known each other for at least a decade by now, but I didn't even know this thing about him. I didn't even know what to do to help him, much less not to break into an argument with him. I scooted a little closer to him, but decided to keep some distance between us. I didn't want to make him feel like he was cornered. "Richie, do you want to hold my hand?" He grabbed my hand and his hand was sweaty. I felt sorry for him. I'd never seen him like that. "It's alright," I said. "Thank you," he muttered and then pressed a kiss on my wrist. What the actual hell? There was no way he wasn't drunk. "You're very nice to me, Omar." "Only for right now," I muttered to myself. But that did not mean that I did not feel a slight tremble within me at the touch. Even after Richie had left my hand alone, I could still feel the touch of his lips on my wrist. I didn't dare to say it was the most romantic touch any man had ever left on me. To think it came from Richie, of all people, was an insane thought. In return, when he seemed to have calmed down but was still somewhat on the edge, I found his face in the dark and kissed him on the cheek. "It's okay, Richie. You're safe." I wasn't sure why I did that, but I would always blame it on the alcohol. Sometime later, the lights came back soon. The elevator started working again, and Richie and I walked out of there, stumbling on our feet. At some point, I even had to hold his hand to make sure he did not fall and break his nose on the concrete floor. It was past midnight by then. When I met Rage, the security guard, I couldn't help but give him an earful. "You should at least check the building. Keep the generator on, man. Don't you feel scared of the dark?" I exclaimed and felt exasperated when he said that he had fallen asleep. "I will keep the generator on," Rage added. "Maybe we should take the same cab." I announced it to Richie. He was heavy, and I couldn't help but roll my eyes as I dragged him off the premises. Because Richie was still somewhat out of his wits and had lost his house keys, I had to bring him to my home. I dropped him in the guest bedroom and dropped dead on my own bed. I didn't wake up until tomorrow. The next day. It was Saturday, so I woke up late, but when I did wake up, I couldn't help but wince and feel stupid in my office clothes. The fact that I was still dressed in dirty clothes and had been so tired yesterday to sleep like that annoyed me to no end. I blamed it all on Richie. The moment his name came into my head, I sat up on my bed with a groan. I had to make sure that he was safe. I had to make sure he hadn't made a mess out of my guest's room. I didn't trust him with anything after all. But when I walked into the guest's room, I found him sleeping. I made sure he was sleeping and then walked out of the room. I wasn't sure why I was acting decent around him. I didn't have any obligations. Most importantly, our history was the same as before. I didn't need to be so forgivable, but whatever. I took a shower, dressed in my comfortable clothes, and decided to cook something. I was starving, and I was sure Richie was too. Not that I cared for him. He stumbled out of the room when I was almost done with breakfast. "Hey," he said, groaning, wincing, and rubbing his eyes all the same. "Thank you for, last night. I know you saved my life." "Okay," I replied and served him a plate. "Not that I'm gonna mention the kiss," he muttered softly, but kept his eyes on me. "Not that I'm gonna mention that kiss, though. Thank you," he added, "for the food. It smells, amazing." I flushed red. "You started it," I exclaimed passionately. "It was still on your wrist. You kissed me on the corner of my mouth," he replied. "No, it was the cheek," I replied just as passionately. I still flushed with shame. Did I actually kiss him on the corner of his mouth? That was wrong, but it was dark. I couldn't tell anyone. My God, that would be embarrassing. He clicked his tongue with a small smile. "I still thank you." I rolled my eyes, my heart still in my throat. Whatever, that doesn't make us friends. Immediately, his face fell. I cleared my throat. "Eat my hard work, loser." "Thanks," Richie said again. "Stop making faces at my food," I exclaimed. "You need a lesson or two from me, sweetheart." I flushed. "Shut up." A few days later. That changed nothing between us. Nothing could, I believed. The scars ran deeper than any present gratitude, or something. If you paid me enough, I could even murder Richie for you. But I hoped that day wouldn't come. I didn't want to be a murderer after all. The days passed just like that. Richie and I didn't really interact after that one day. When our boss was informed of what happened, he gave Rage strict instructions to check all the cabins, washrooms, and elevators before closing the building for the day. I thought, well, the problem was solved. Richie and I acted decently around each other now. He owed me, after all. But that didn't mean all the trouble had ended. Oh no, the worst was yet to come. In the few days leading up to the final argument, it was obvious that the tension was building between us. And then, one late evening, it happened. Richie and I were 2 of the 3 people left to work on the final stage of the project. The third person, April, soon left after 8, citing some family function that she absolutely needed to attend. After she left, only Richie and I were left. It was silent between us for nearly half an hour, except for the occasional grunts that he let out. "We cannot take the risk. Can you be quick, Omar? I do not want to get stuck." "Trust me, I want this to end more than you do," I replied. I do not want to get stuck with a cheater again, after all. I muttered softly, more to myself than to him. "What did you say?" he asked, sounding annoyed. He always sounded annoyed, and that in turn made me feel annoyed. I rolled my eyes. "Let's not play saints, alright? You cheated, and that's why I call you a cheater. Simple." "I did not cheat. What are you even talking about?" He threw his hands in the air before realization seemed to dawn on his face. "Oh, you are not talking about Jack, are you? Were there others?" He pursued his lips and stalked closer to me, enough that I nearly felt cornered against the work table. He was significantly taller than me, so it shamed me to lean my head up to look at him. Talk about self-respect in the trash. You do not need to feel hurt for him. He was a cheat. "Oh, he was a cheat, of course. He was a cheat, but you helped him." "I did not," Richie replied. "I didn't know you guys were dating." "Right," I replied sarcastically and turned my head to the side to avoid looking at him. Up this close, he looked even more gorgeous. And trust me when I say this, staying angry against gorgeous people was not easy. But Richie seemed in a certain mood. He grabbed my chin rather softly and turned my face so that he could stare me down. "Listen," he said softly this time. "The reason why I even flirted with him in the first place is because I assumed him to be a friend of yours. When I mentioned it, he confirmed that you guys had known each other for a couple of years by then and were good friends. I thought, well, I could always date your friend to get on your nerves. He never told me he was dating you." "Why would you even do that?" I couldn't help but ask. "Because I was young and dumb," Richie replied. "Doesn't make sense," I replied. He dropped his hold from my chin. "He was two-timing us, Omar. How hard is that to understand? For 2 months, I had absolutely no idea about it. And when I found out about it, I broke things off with him." He shook his head and placed his hand on the table, next to my hip. I wondered if he understood how intimate this position was. "You never gave me a chance. You just got so angry, and you had every right to, actually. And then this feeling developed over the years. You insulted me left and right, and I couldn't help but act childish too." Shame engulfed me, and to my horror, I could feel tears in my eyes. "Omar," Richie said, "I'm sorry, our arguments have always been so stupid. I think we need to grow out of it. It's been some time, Omar." "We were teenagers," I said. "I mean, we are not that old now?" Richie replied and rubbed a hand over the back of his head. "Still young." "And dumb," I replied. I couldn't believe I wasted so many years of my life hating this man for a guy who had been two-timing us. Even the idea was ridiculous. Jack was such a nice guy. "Well, he could pretend." I pushed Richie off of me and gathered my items in my bag. "I'm leaving," I announced, tears in my eyes. I absolutely, brutally felt humiliated. "Carry on with whatever you can manage. Bye." "Omar." A few days later. Sadly, life did not stop just because it threw a nasty curveball at you. It was the same for me. The project was still not done, so I was bound to return it. And my boss, who had absolutely no money to run his company, decided it was the right time to announce a work trip. Yay! I couldn't help but roll my eyes as he droned and droned about the benefits of finishing the project within this week. "Look guys, I know this has been exhausting, but you'll love what I have planned." He clapped his hands excitedly. A few of my other teammates murmured in happiness. It embarrassed me to observe that only Richie and I looked half dead. But it made sense. Richie and I had barely interacted in the past few days, given the rather weird note we ended our conversation all those days ago. In fact, if I were to say so myself, the silence between us did not make me feel uncomfortable. I was glad it was there. In fact, there was no reason to stand on guard or to build up fit replies for him. As our boss, Harry, drowned on and on, Richie and I caught each other's eyes for the slightest second. We quickly looked away. I was, to my horror, blushing to the tips of my hair. And Harry commenced his speech. All of you are coming. And that was how eagerly the project finished in the next 2 days. The trip was for the weekend, and all of us were supposed to leave from the company on the coming Friday. Harry had booked a small bus for us all, and at some point, it looked like Richie and I would end up sitting next to each other. When it didn't happen, I sighed in relief, my face warm and red. I wanted to talk to him and listen to him, but the mere thought of looking into his eyes after he revealed everything to me seemed to embarrass me to my core. God, I didn't want to deal with that embarrassment. The ride ended within an hour, and we ended up in front of a shady-looking hotel. Don't look at me like that, guys. This is all I could afford. But I promise it's better inside. I have checked out the rooms myself. Harry chimed in before any of us could utter a word. He patted each one of us and he handed us our room keys. Each room would have 2 of the teammates. And as cliche as it could go, Richie and I were assigned the same room. Harry patted Richie's shoulder. You two need to work on your professional relationship. Have a heart-to-heart. I do not care. But I want both of you changed by the end of this weekend. Otherwise, it will reflect badly on you. Whatever. I muttered and snatched the keys from Richie's hand. He followed me in silence. I can't believe this. I muttered some more. This is ridiculous. Maybe Harry's right. We gotta work on it. I rolled my eyes. Please don't lecture me, dear sir. Richie locked the door after himself and then the audacity. Grabbed my hand to turn me around. If we didn't have the history that we so ardently shared, I really would have assumed this to be a very romantic moment. And going by the kind look in Richie's eyes, he didn't really look in the mood to fight. Well, neither was I, so he was no better than me. Omar, let's not fight. We both have worked hard on this project. We deserve some celebration and rest, lots of it. I pursued my lips and gave him a nod of understanding. Don't bother me and it will be alright. He sighed with a small smile. You're impossible not to bother. Drop my hand, I asked. Richie did so and raised his hands in surrender. Will you take the shower first? Yes, I replied and dropped my bag on the bed nearest to the window. It was going to be mine for the next 2 nights. Don't even think about going first. Richie clicked his tongue. I'm thinking of something even better. What? I asked. We can always shower together to save some water. Ouch! The next day, when I woke up, I found a breakfast plate on the bedside table. I looked up to find Richie staring out of the window, his shirt half buttoned. He looked indecent. The more I found his look hot, the more I wanted to smack him in the face. The fact that I spent so many years disliking this hot man, God forbid I do that ever again. Oh, you're awake, Richie said and pointed at the bathroom. I haven't used all the warm water. You can take a good shower. I brought breakfast too. It's late and they said it will all get finished soon. Why was he so nice? Was he always this nice, even when I didn't want to give him a chance? Embarrassment seemed like a permanent emotion now. Thanks, I said. I'm not a bad guy, Omar, Richie said. At least not as bad as you make me to be. He clicked his tongue as if to put emphasis on his observation. Oh, screw you, I replied passionately, but couldn't help the small smile that slipped on my face. But thanks. You're welcome, he replied with a smile. The same evening, Richie was overlooking the skyline when I found him on the terrace in the evening. Harry had just asked everyone to gather because he wanted all of us to have dinner together, just to prove how nice everyone was to everyone. There was not a single true letter in that sentence, but I wasn't going to lose my job over a truth. Then, Harry asked me to bring Richie from wherever the hell he was. I found him here, on the terrace. Richie, I called and crossed my arms over my chest. He didn't turn around. Richie, everyone's waiting for you, dude. Will you come down already? Richie didn't turn around. He had his hands shoved into his pant pockets, and his eyes were fixed on the skyline. Anger boiled inside of me. What was wrong with this man? Was he deaf? I was sure I hadn't been interacting with a deaf person all these years. "Richie!" I screamed. When he still didn't turn around, I stalked close to him and shoved at his back in irritation. He stumbled and then fumbled. He turned to me with a wide-eyed look and then removed his AirPods. God, no. I was going to kill myself. There was nothing else left to do now. "Why did you do that?" he asked. I stopped and sucked on my bottom lip. "You weren't listening?" "Omar, AirPods. You could have killed me," he exclaimed. "Well, in my defense, that wasn't my intention. I was ashamed and I wanted to get out of here. If he said a wrong word, I was going to jump off this building." Richie sighed. "Well, what do you want?" "Food, you come." I replied and then thought, what the hell was I saying? I mean, Harry has asked everyone to have dinner together. Everyone's waiting. "Alright, I am coming." He turned around to the skyline again. "Now," I said. Instead of saying anything, he grabbed my arm and pulled me by his side. Before I could utter another word, he pointed ahead at us. "Look, Omar," he said, and so I did. The next morning. When I woke up the next day, I found Richie's eyes already on me. I already had an impending headache, and this man wanted to kill me with a look. "What?" I groggily asked. "God, shouldn't have drank so much." "You are a pretty sleeper, you know that?" I fumbled my next words, and my face warmed despite myself. I hated this man. "What is wrong with you?" He shrugged as he sat up on the bed, shirtless. I looked away. "You're a pretty sleeper, but a noisy one too." "I hate you," I replied. "Now that's problematic." He replied, and I heard him getting off the bed. "Because I like you." A few hours later. "Hey Omar," Richie said and peeked his head at me. "Will you come to the terrace today?" Then he showed me the picture he had taken of me yesterday. Richie and I had spent the next half an hour whining about how pretty everything looked from the terrace. "It will be fun." "You can delete that picture." "I do not think I want that. Will you come?" I blushed, but didn't mention it again. "Yeah, alright. Last day here and all." Richie gave me a small smile in return. "Let's make it memorable." And memorable it became. Because even though Richie and I weren't drunk, we kissed. And kissed and kissed. It started out with a single comment from Richie after an hour or so of our debate on whether reality was subjective or objective. It started out with, "Do you think our story is that of enemies to lovers?" I blinked at his question and then looked at him with a strange mix of emotions in me. "What is wrong?" He cut me off with a shake of his head and then clicked his tongue. "That is an old question. Ask something new." "What new question?" "Like, Richie, do you want to kiss me?" he suggested with a small smile. He was smoking and I couldn't help but look at the cigarette hanging off his lips. He looked gorgeous. I hated gorgeous people. Why would I ask that? Even when I asked it, I knew I sounded flustered. He smiled and I was undone. And that was how we shared our next kiss. A few days later. We were back in the office and Richie and I were changed men. For one thing, we kissed whenever possible. We hadn't given our situation a name, but we kissed so much that I was sure one of these days my lips would fall off. And Richie always seemed smug about it, the tall guy that he was. Things seemed to go well between us until I decided to get on his nerves again. In my defense, I did it for fun. The project was finished and the presentation was going on. During the presentation with another company, Harry happened to praise me more than he did with any other member of the team. He insisted that it was entirely a team effort, but if Omar hadn't given some of his precious input, it would have taken longer. When it was all over, I stalked towards Richie. "What does failure smell like?" "I do not resent you for that. You did actually do a lot." Richie replied, "But you're jealous?" "And why would I be?" Richie furrowed his eyebrows. "Do you think I hate you, Omar? Or that I hate that you're so much better than me?" "No, I didn't mean it in that way." "Okay," Richie replied and sucked on his bottom lip. "Now, if you'll excuse me." "Richie," I said and held his hand. A couple of our colleagues looked at us and then silently walked away. "Please, it was a joke. Do you want me to kiss it better?" "Will you?" he asked. Not here, no. Don't want to lose my job. Okay. He dragged us off into the washroom and then demanded a kiss. So I kissed him. The coming Friday, trouble began again. Seeing the success of the project, Harry suggested we brainstorm new ideas for more projects. He was sure this way we would be able to save the company. Naturally, Richie and I decided to work in pairs. And it was Friday and late. Before either of us knew, it was almost midnight. We knew better than to stay any longer, so Richie and I gathered our bags and walked out of the office with the sole purpose of getting out before Rage locked us in again. We were holding hands now that there was no one around us, and with each of his stupid jokes, I giggled without shame. He was a natural comedian. We are not taking the elevator, I told him. Yep, no chances this time. We decided to take the stairs. Now, what happened, we could only guess. As Rage was guided, he checked our floor and the elevators. When he found no one there, he locked the building and the staircase. When Richie and I reached the ground floor, we tried to open it, but it was locked. We checked every other floor and all of the doors were locked. Richie, I said. What the hell? He locked us in again. Richie mumbled. We can call someone? I suggested. But do we want to call someone? He asked. I looked at him and he looked at me. Then we started laughing hysterically. I hugged him when we sat down on the stairs. We can wait a little, he said, kissing my cheek before reaching for my mouth. That sounds nice. I agreed and kissed him. Will you be alright though? It's closed and stuff. I rubbed my index finger on his bottom lip. For some time, yes. Until then, we can wait. Are you sure? He made a face. Kinda, yes. God, at least there wasn't any CCTV cameras here. That was the silliest first date ever. Conclusion. Richie and I, went on an actual date the following day. After the date, he suggested we go to the sauna. It was stupid and I wanted to sock him in the face for that. But he was also gorgeous, and being almost naked around gorgeous people was never a bad idea. So we decided to do just that. And then we slept at my house, even though his home was next to mine. The end. Have you ever had romantic feelings for your rival? Thanks for watching! And hey, if you enjoyed our stories, consider supporting us on Ko-Fi and join our Rainbow Force to help us bring more LGBTQ+ stories to life. And to stay wholesome.